Good morning, everyone. So before I start, I went out for dinner last night with one of our investors. I was a little bit tired, Mexican restaurant, by the way, and didn't want to drink, said, okay, I'm going to go to bed early. And then he started telling me a story, how he had the best keynote of his life when he was hungover. I was like, well, maybe one drink couldn't be too bad. That was before we had 10 tequila each. So I'm here now. I do my best. Thank you for being here. What am I going to talk about? I am going to talk about Bitcoin, obviously. And I believe that Bitcoin is the #1 driver to fulfill the SDGs. Who knows what the SDGs are? Perfect. So the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and we'll show you in a little bit what they are. So how, Sascha, can you say that Bitcoin is going to fulfill or be the main driver behind the SDGs? It's used for drug money, it's used for human trafficking, it has a lot of energy consumption, it's bad, it's evil, right? I know that most of you don't believe that, but where I usually hold this speech, this is actually common sense. Now, if we think of all of what we just saw, we really have to think of what is Bitcoin for, and Bitcoin is not just a coin, it's not just a digital asset, but it's actually the alternative to our current fiat money system. And the sentence, fix the money, fix the world, I think has a lot of truth in it, if not all truth. And I'm not going to go into this, because all of you probably know this, but eventually Bitcoin is so much better than any fiat money system, because of supply, because of control, because of ownership, transparency, and so forth. Now let's get into this. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So there's 17 of them, and they're all about ending poverty, ending hunger, giving humanity sanitation, water, and so forth. Now I know I have 15 minutes today. It's only 13 now because of my great story before. And therefore you're not going to see all 17, because I usually hold this within 30 to 45 minutes. Let's get into a couple of those, though. So number 1 is end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Now the challenge with the problem of poverty is that inflation and war are the 2 major reasons to create poverty and to decrease equality. Now this is a study that you probably can't really see the numbers because these beautiful orange chairs are in front of it, but the pre-pandemic projection was 581 million people living in poverty. Post-corona, this was already 657 million, so it increased like 13%. And interestingly, at the same time, 10 trillion US dollars were printed. So that's a McKinsey study, it's not my own numbers, but you see 13% increase in poverty globally, while the monetary supply increase is incredible. Most of you know this chart. That's Bitcoin's deflation curve. So Bitcoin is not only going to be the hardest asset of all times when the next halving hits, but its inflation rate will also decrease below 1% per year. And with every single halving, that decreases further and further and further. So with no uncontrolled inflation that comes through Bitcoin, there will be no more or much less poverty. Thesis number 1. Now let's get into the second one. End hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. I'm going to move one of these chairs now so that you can actually see what is on the charts, on the slides. So on the left side, you see the real food price index. And that has shot up, as you can see, since Corona hit, immensely. On the right side, you see the global food insecurity. We were around or a little bit below 800 million, and we actually increased almost to 900 million again. If there was Bitcoin, there was no inflation, the food price index would grow slower. Number 2, ensure healthy lives, promote well-being for all at all ages. This is a very interesting one. On the left, you see a chart that basically shows the stress and anxiety and concern that US citizens have due to inflation. The colors red and yellow are the ones that are important. Red is very stressed on the left, on the right, very concerned. The yellow is moderately stressed and somewhat concerned. More than 75% of all Americans are either super stressed or partially stressed, and super concerned or partially concerned about inflation. Now, these concerns and this stress actually lead to cardiovascular diseases, they lead to psychological insecurities, yada, 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 yada. Now you get the drift. If there was Bitcoin, there was no inflation, people would be much healthier and happier. Now the fourth one, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. This is the financial literacy that you see in nations all over the world. And the interesting part is that this is below 50% on average in all sorts of countries, even the Western world. So financial literacy, how financially educated are people within these countries? And there's also a difference between male and female. While male somewhat is a little bit better educated, female have even less education in that. I don't know how many of you learned about business in school. I never did. How many of you learned about finances, economics, and so forth in school? I never did. And even in my business administration studies, I learned less than I learned in Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, the interesting thing is we start through finance, many of us, or do deep tech and development. But then we get into software, we get into hardware, we think of mining, we think of the social behind this orange chair. We think about economics, and we actually get accountable. Because eventually, my keys, my wallets, I actually learn what accountability means. There's no bank, there's no third intermediate that I can finger point at if something happens, but it's me. So there's many, many things that you actually start learning if you want to get down the rabbit hole. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. So this is another interesting chart. Globally, only about 40% of women have a bank account, have been depositors or borrowers. This is 2016. Interestingly, there's no other number since 2016. This may have grown a little bit, but I don't think it has grown much. The reason is in those areas, specifically about in the emerging markets, in emerging countries in Asia and in Africa and so forth, are because of social and religious reasons, where the man is the one going to the bank, having the bank account and so forth, which leaves women with no choice because they have to follow what their man is saying. Now with Bitcoin, anyone can go online, create a wallet, and Bitcoin doesn't care. If you're black, if you're white, if you're Asian, if you're a woman, if you're transgender, Bitcoin doesn't care. Now we're starting to jump because I can't do all 17, even though I'm now at 7 minutes, so I think I could have done them all. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Now this is a very interesting one. We're a Bitcoin miner, right? With Green Mining DAO, we're sourcing renewable energy, we're producing Bitcoin, we're reusing the heat to dry fruit and do all of that stuff in between. So we're consistently thinking of that energy topic. By the way, there's about 800 million people globally that don't have access to electricity in their home, which I think is an incredible number. They can't switch on their lights with their finger, which we think is super normal. They can't. Now, the biggest problem is to electrify these people, not with a, that sounded wrong, to actually get energy into their homes. There's a big problem about building out the grid and building out energy plants. Very often, this is a capital-intense thing, very often they don't know, do I first build the solar power plant, the hydropower plant, or the wind farm, or whatever? Or do I first build the grid? Because very often the energy is in places where there's no grid yet. And both things are unaffordable in many cases. But with Bitcoin, you can actually build out the plant first, sell the energy immediately to a Bitcoin miner that just brings its mobile plants there, and the project generates revenue of which they can pay the grid build out later on. This is actually reality. So the company Gridless is doing this in Africa. They have empowered the first a couple villages with building small hydropower plants, which would have not been affordable for the village, but due to the additional revenue model that they had to give the surplus of energy to the Bitcoin miners, they were able to build out this grid for them and actually get energy into their homes. And I'm just thinking that this can be done on big scale. Now, number 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. This one is, I think, very interesting as well, because who of you knows what zombie companies are? All right, for those that don't know, don't worry, I didn't know either, but zombie companies are the companies that are so overdebted, that have so much loan taken out, and are so inefficient in their processes that you will never really get back to business and never really be back in profit. So they're actually just walking deads. Right? They're just consuming our tax money or someone else's money, and they will never get back. Now here's the numbers of listed and private companies in the US. And the average is around, or it's a little bit below 10% of all companies, be it listed or private, that are these kind of zombie companies. And that's the US numbers, but believe me, the numbers in other countries look similar. Now the interesting thing is, and this is the study, The Rise of the Walking Dead Zombie Firms Around the World. I can highly recommend. So once you have the choice to watch Walking Dead on Netflix or reading this, I'd recommend this one. It's similarly interesting. Now, we all know about Bitcoin's limited supply versus fiat money's unlimited supply. And my hypothesis, and I think many of yours is as well, if I only have a limited amount of something that is highly valuable, would I actually throw this at zombie companies? Would I throw this at assets that are not valuable, that are not profitable, inefficient? 2 minutes? My clock says 4. Anyway, we think that we wouldn't, right? So if we only had Bitcoin standard limited supply, we'd probably invest our money much smarter. So the 12th is ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. This is the time preference theory, high time preference. Basically, I want to consume what I want now versus saving on something and keeping it to fulfill it in the future, which may be better. On the left, we see great brands, burgers, and smoking habits and drinking habits like tequila. This is actually something that is nurtured by fiat monetary system. I think that many of us that are believing in Bitcoin, saving in Bitcoin, and not wasting their money on wasteless and useless stuff are thinking twice about what to eat, how to do sports, and kind of stay fit because we want to enjoy our wealth in the future. So this automatically creates a low time preference, and much better thinking and consumption pattern. Now, number 13, I think it's the last minute, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. We have this world clock showing less than 8 years for our planet, and I think that if we had a more sustainable financial system, if we had more equality of genders and human people, and countries, we'd have more peace. If we had the grid built out and everyone had renewable energy, and we also had a less wasteful behavior, most likely we could turn this clock around. But there's one more, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalization, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. Well, I think I touched a lot on these things. If we had more independent countries, no capital for war like in Israel or in Ukraine or in other countries all over the world, a mindset of a limited supply and also more mindful consumption, this would lead to less dependence on single nation like the US and the US dollar, and this would mean freedom, peace, and sustainable future. I didn't make up these numbers, and I didn't get them at Cointelegraph or something, but these are United Nations, IMF, European Commission, and other trustworthy sources of data. Bitcoin is the alternative for our current financial system and for our current challenges, and I invite you all to support that, and I think you all do. That's why we're here. My name is Sascha. I'm the CEO of Green Mining DAO. We want everyone in the world to be a Bitcoin miner so that they print their own money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.